Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sam Jacobs from 6 Degrees Investor Relations. I'll be hosting today's presentation from Island Pharmaceuticals CEO and Managing Director, Dr. David Foster, alongside the company's non-executive chairman, Mr. Jason Carroll. In today's presentation, David and Jason will provide a comprehensive update on the clinical development and approval pathway for the Galidesivir antiviral program. This will include the US FDA's response to Island's Type C meeting request regarding the use of the FDA's animal rule for Galidesivir's development and approval, as well as its eligibility for a priority review voucher, and there'll also be a summary of other clinical development activities. So after the presentation, we'll commence a Q&A that will comprise both written submissions and a live questions segment on the platform. And a recording of the webinar will be available on the company's channels later today. But for now, we'll commence the presentation. So David, Dr. Foster, over to you.
Sam, thank you very much. I am here with Jason Carroll. I think Jason may have just stepped off the screen, but I want to thank him for being here, for being so active in the work that we've been doing recently. I want to thank all of you for showing up to hear the update that we're going to give today. It's a pivotal day, really, in the history of the company, and we're thrilled to tell you about it. So without further ado, a quick corporate overview just to give everybody an update on where we stand. Island Pharmaceuticals is an antiviral drug development company. We have two pipeline assets. We have ISL 101, which we've been talking about for quite some time. That's all I'm going to say about ISL 101 today. There are things going on there that we'll be excited to update you on in the future, but today is all about Galidesivir. And so after this slide, we'll jump into Galidesivir and the very exciting and important updates that I want to share. But the corporate overview, we've got about 254 million shares outstanding. When we were last trading before the trading halt, we were about a $108 million company. I think that might need to be updated based on some of the activities today, which we're grateful for. You can see the stock price has appreciated nicely over the last year, and we're sitting with about $6.9 million in the bank at the end of last quarter. I do want to point out some substantial shareholders, and we are very, very grateful to phenomenal investors who have been along with the journey for us, for many of them for quite a while. Dr. Bill Garner, my co-founder in the company. Bill's been with us for a long time. Jason Carroll is a longtime supporter of the company, obviously now chairman. Grateful for MWP Partners out of Hong Kong, as well as Dr. Daniel Tillett. Again, fantastic supporters, smart guys. We're very grateful for them, as well as all of our other shareholders. Turning to the board of directors, in addition to myself, I already mentioned Jason Carroll, who is our chairman. I want to give a shout out to Chris Tumanopoulos. The three of us, if you guys could see, we work together every single day. We're on the phone talking to each other, working hard, working efficiently, getting things done. And I really couldn't be happier than working with these two guys on these two programs. Here is an asset that we acquired just about 14 weeks ago. It has not been very long since we told you that we had acquired this asset from BioCryst. BioCryst is a company in the United States that had been developing Galidesivir and had done so with about $70 million of US government money. The government was very interested in the development of this molecule. Then they ran into COVID, money got derailed into other programs, and we were the fortunate ones who were able to pick up the Galidesivir asset. It is a broad-acting antiviral, which I'll show you a slide in a few slides and give you some more information about that. One of the things I want to tell you today is we have confirmed the regulatory pathway that we can proceed, and that is going to be under the FDA's animal rule. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. In addition, we've gotten confirmation that getting Galidesivir approved in Marburg would be eligible for priority review voucher upon approval. So with path in front of us, we've substantially de-risked this program from a regulatory path, from a commercial path, and we've been able to interact with the FDA to get feedback on the next study designs. All of this goes to as we get this molecule approved in Marburg would be the lead indication. We may be able to unlock the strategic national stockpile in the US where we can get government contracts to supply the stockpile Galidesivir. This would be a very, very important commercial milestone for us. So when we met last time back in July and we talked about the Galidesivir asset and the acquisition that we had just made, we said we're working hard to file a Type C meeting with the FDA. And in that meeting, we want to ask the FDA three major questions. The first, if pursuing Marburg would open the door to the animal rule path for a Marburg countermeasure. That was the first question. The second, if Galidesivir were to get approved, even if it were approved under the animal rule, would it still be eligible for a priority review voucher? That was the second question. And third, we asked the FDA to give us guidance on the structure of a non-human primate study that they would approve, that we could pursue, that would result in an animal rule pathway. And we've gotten all of those questions answered. So the answer to the first question, yes, the animal rule is available for a Marburg development plan pursuing a countermeasure against the Marburg virus. Tick one. The animal rule is eligible. Tick two, the FDA confirmed that getting Galidesivir approved in Marburg would result in a priority review voucher. We can talk about the importance of these vouchers. It is a benefit that you receive, a voucher that you receive when you get your drug approved and you can sell them. They most recently sold for between $150 and $155 million US. Again, that would occur when we get the drug approved in the not too distant future. In addition, the FDA gave us clear guidance on what they would want to see in a non-human primate study in Marburg infected animals that would result in a pivotal study that we could pursue, and then we'd be working on our new drug application. We are working on all of this right now, and we'll have more updates as we go down the road. But again, a monumental day in the de-risking of this program for the company. So I've mentioned the animal rule several times, and I want to highlight what does that really mean. So let's look at the top line here. The top line highlights what a traditional drug development path looks like. It takes about 10 to 15 years. It takes about $2 billion or more of US dollars, $2 billion US dollars. And importantly, I want you to note, it requires phase 1 safety studies. It requires phase 2 efficacy studies, and then a larger phase 3 efficacy study. This can take a very long time, and it can be very, very expensive. If you're pursuing a disease such as Marburg, where it's a horrible hemorrhagic fever, high lethality, very few cases ever even appear anywhere in the world. And you have to ask yourself, how on earth would you even run that clinical trial? Because if you put placebos into that study and you put humans on a placebo in that study, the placebo subjects are going to die because the lethality is so high. Moreover, you really can't even functionally run that clinical trial because the cases are so few and far between. So the FDA, recognizing this, created a path that said, if you cannot run an ethical or safe human efficacy study, you can get approval based on animal efficacy if you also run phase 1 clinical trials to demonstrate your drug is safe. So you need to run 2 animal efficacy studies in appropriate animal models and then fulfill a safety database in human subjects. That's what the animal rule looks like. So what you don't have to do is phase 2 or phase 3 human efficacy studies. Again, saving millions of dollars and years of time. It is incredibly valuable to be able to move very quickly into an animal efficacy study, phase 1 clinical trials, and then work on a new drug application. So where does Galidesivir sit in that animal rule path? Let's look at the third line here. If you look at the darker green boxes, these are things that are already done. And in fact, one of the 2 animal studies that is needed to comply with the animal rule requirements is already done. I'll show you data from that shortly. What that means is we may be one pivotal animal study away from beginning to work on our new drug application. Let me say that again. We may be one pivotal animal study away from beginning to work on our new drug application. We couldn't be more excited. It is an incredibly important and valuable time for the company to receive this feedback from the FDA to confirm that we can go down this animal rule path. Couldn't be more excited to tell you about it.
David. We talked about the number of pathways, and most people have heard a lot about the FDA pathways. Now, not many people, I guess, until 14 or so weeks ago, have heard about the animal rule pathway. And it's exciting to say this is a hyper accelerated pathway that was sort of being discussed a few weeks ago. It's today become very real. So the slide highlights the reasons why Galidesivir is such a transformational opportunity for the company. Looking at an early phase oncology example, for instance, is what most biotech people would understand. They would say, okay, it's 1, 2, 3 in oncology, even with breakthrough or fast track designation, which really gives you 6, maybe 12 months of acceleration to approval. Companies do face years of phase 2 and 3 human efficacy trials, and these are, tens of millions of dollars to get done. When they actually get out towards the market, they face a market that's usually cluttered, especially if it's a treatment that has a market already built. Competitive market pressures are huge. There's always inventory issues, and once launched, there is a slow, difficult climb. I know I've worked with a number of oncology products before. A long, slow climb to reach peak year sales. Now, Galidesivir is on a completely different trajectory. The FDA being confirmed under the animal rule, a pathway that is actually so rare, it's been utilized just 16 times in more than 2 decades, all reserved to protect against national security threats. And because of the devastating pathogen involved, this approval bypasses all human efficacy studies, relying instead on validated primate survival data. And it may allow Galidesivir to deliver peak year sales in its first commercial year via procurement into the strategic national stockpile. The expectation that we have is based on precedent. Every animal rule approval for category A biothreats to date has converted into large government procurement. And virus is also a rare tropical disease. This also means eligibility on FDA approval to a PRV worth over 200 million Aussie dollars, followed by entry into a market defined by urgency, exclusivity, and revenues backed by US government continuity mandates. This is the scale of the opportunity for us. It's truly a mistake. David?
Thanks, Jason. So Jason outlined very nicely the path forward, the benefits of the animal rule, the opportunity with the stockpile, the opportunity with the priority review voucher. But that's really not all. And I want to put this slide up here to remind you of the many, many viruses where we've seen activity with Galidesivir. So we see activity in Marburg virus, which we've already talked about. We've seen activity with Ebola, Sudan virus. Most of this is preclinical activity, but we have animal studies showing excellent activity with the Ebola virus and with Zika virus, among others. Nipah virus. A virus we're watching very closely is the measles virus. We have observed, even over the last 6 to 12 months, a dramatic increase in the number of measles cases. This is causing significant concern and fright, really, around the globe because there's no treatment for measles. It had been essentially eradicated as a result of the vaccines. We're now seeing it come back. We believe we may have a countermeasure against measles. We're working on that right now, actually. But this is the slide that really convinced me and many others that we were very interested in Galidesivir. And what we're looking at here is a survival curve of non-human primates that are infected with the Marburg virus. So on the x-axis, we're looking at time of infection. On the y-axis, we're looking at percent survival. So at time 0, 100% survival, all the animals are happy and healthy. Then we infect the animals. This was work done by BioCryst and USAMRIID at Fort Detrick. They infected the animals with the Marburg virus in the presence or absence of drug, and they started treating the animals with drug, with Galidesivir, at 1 hour post-infection, 24 and 48 hours post-infection. That's 1 and 2 days after they were infected with a lethal Marburg virus. If you look at the light green trace here, what you can see is that about day 12, all of the control animals are dead, 100% lethality if they were not on drug. However, if you look at the blue and the dark green lines, These are the animals that were dosed at 24 and 48 hours post-infection, 100% survival in drug-treated animals. If you look at the red line, this was 5 of 6 animals survived if they were treated 1 hour post-infection. And frankly, this is a bit of a confusing result, to be real honest. I think this is an outlier result, and we can talk about it later if you'd like. But I think the take home here is that 17 of 18 animals survived. 17 of 18 animals were doing just fine, even if they were at 24 and 48 hours post-infection with a lethal strain of the Marburg virus. Phenomenal result, incredibly important. This comprises the first of the 2 experiments that we need to do, of the 2 animal studies that we need to do. We essentially need to do this again in order to move forward with the animal rule. This is another way to look at the data I just showed you, and I think it's simple to say the placebo animals, 0 of 6 survived, 0% survival. Animals treated with drug, 94% survival. All of these boxes in green, 17 of 18 animals survived when they were treated with Galidesivir. So phenomenal result. And again, this is what we need to do again.
Thanks, David. I mentioned earlier there's a powerful commercial precedent tied to the animal rule. Every product approved under this pathway has secured a strategic national stockpile contract, which approves products over the last decade, averaging nearly $500 million in lifetime value each. And 7 out of 8 of those are still continuing to get contracts. So obviously the $500 million will get larger over time. While we see sporadic Marburg infections in nature, the value of Galidesivir is as a bioterror countermeasure, a medicine that's stockpiled and destined to be used in the event of a bioterror attack. Right now, Marburg virus remains the only category A biothreat without a national stockpile countermeasure, despite $600 million already being spent by the US government to find one, with no approved products yet available. So Galidesivir is in prime position to close this gap, unlocking both the near-term monetization through a priority review voucher. And we have obviously a lot of validated work around PRVs. The value that's obtained in the last 3 is between 150 and 155 million US dollars, as well as these long-term predictable revenues via a multi-year national stockpile procurement contract. Next slide, David. The next slide really underscores the gravity of Galidesivir's role as more than any other product, more than a therapeutic. It will become a cornerstone of hopefully it never needs US deployment. But this is the event of a Marburg outbreak in the continental US. The continuity of government and infrastructure depends on critical personnel. The president and cabinet, congressional leadership, Supreme Court justices, national security agencies, frontline healthcare teams, and essential infrastructure leaders that can keep the country running, which represents between 10 and 20,000 individuals whose survival ensures the stability of the nation's leadership in a time essentially of war. And this architecture is modeled directly on continuity of government protocols. Obviously, we think we'll even get more than that in the national stockpile because there's a lot of civilians out there as well. But the message is absolutely clear for us that Galidesivir is positioned as a bioterror insurance to safeguard the highest tiers of US government and response capability against the world's most deadly virus. David?
Jason, thank you very much. So where do we go from here? Again, it's been a roller coaster and an exciting roller coaster over the last few months. We've been working with the FDA to get the feedback from the FDA that we're telling you about today. From here, we've mentioned a number of times that there may be opportunities within the US government to begin conversations about the stockpile, to think about potential sources of non-dilutive funding. And we're working on US government engagement initiatives right now that we hope we'll be able to update you on that in the not too distant future. In addition, you know that we need to run a non-human primate study. We need at least another pivotal non-human primate study. And we are near term nailing down that BSL-4 facility that will conduct those studies. We have the opportunity, since we've received the FDA feedback, we have an opportunity to go back to the FDA within a couple of weeks, ask some clarifying questions, and there are a few things that we want to get clarified. So we're working on that right now. Again, that'll go back in, I think December 2nd is the date that we need to submit those by. We're working on that. In addition, recognizing that we now have an animal rule path in front of us, we are working with a group to establish a Galidesivir advisory committee and hope to have some updates for you here. So the next quarter is going to be very, very busy advancing this program along. We're also working to refine the study protocol. We'll be interacting with the FDA to get them to approve the final study protocol that we need to define what we need to do to move through the animal rule for approval for Galidesivir. And then we'll be working on that study. And then following that, we'll be working on the new drug application. So again, the next 3, 6, 9 months, phenomenally exciting time for the company. Today is a pivotal day. We've de-risked the program substantially. And, I would ask you to join us for the ride. I think that's the end of that presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides right now, but I think we probably do have some questions that we're happy to address.
Yeah, thanks, David. We certainly do have plenty of questions from the floor and a lot of interest in this update. So perhaps just to kick off this Q&A, Jason covered off, I think, quite thoroughly on the commercial outlook for treatments that successfully achieve the animal rule. So for starting, just for our listeners today, can you talk about how common is the animal rule in the application process, and how many times have drugs under this path kind of been knocked back, just to put it in context for our attendees here today?
Yeah, Jason, I'm going to let you take this. I know you've done a lot of looking into the frequency with which the animal rule has been used, and you got some numbers there.
Yeah, the number of animal rule approvals that have occurred is 0.2% of all NDA filings that the FDA has received since the year 2000. So we're looking at a total of 16 that have gone via the animal rule, and predominantly because these are the killer items that they have to try and protect. So you don't do phase 2 and 3 studies if you get approval to that pathway. It also shaves off 5 or more development timelines. So it's a very significant pathway if you can get yourself upon it. But it's only happened 16 times before we expect to travel that same pathway.
Yeah. And if I could follow on to that, and I think you make a really good point. The FDA actually makes it very rigorous for you to be able to participate in an animal rule program. It is not an easy thing to do. The type of threats that you have to be engaged with is risky. They are dangerous. There's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through in order to even get on this list. So the fact that we've done that is remarkable. Yeah. And so it's pretty rarefied air, quite frankly, that we're even able to have this conversation. And so, I think the numbers speak to that, Jason. The small number of studies that have been approved or drugs that have been approved really speaks to how hard it is to get into it, to even be considered.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, well noted. Thanks to both of you. David, perhaps just following on from that one for you, where you were talking about that Marburg non-human primate study and those details there. We had one attendee ask if we could discuss the lone death that was in that period post-infection. And they also asked why the difference from 24 hours and 48 hours post-infection. Is it possible just to talk through that, provide some more technical details on the actual trial process?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So in this experiment, you had 6 animals in each cohort, and then you did the animals all at the same time. And then at 1 hour, you dosed the first cohort. At 24 hours, you started dosing the second. At 48 hours, you started dosing the third cohort on drug. To be real honest, I think that one animal that died at 1 hour post-infection is a complete outlier. I really don't know why they died, because they died at a time when the animals had the smallest amount of virus in them. The animals that were dosed at 24 and 48 hours, they've given the virus 1 and 2 days to amplify and to multiply. So they were looking at substantially more virus where the drug was 100% effective. So I believe it's an outlier result. But nonetheless, those are the data. And we have to look at that and we have to address that and say 17 of 18 animals survived. But I think that one is, it's one of the risks of working with animals and doing science is sometimes things like that happen. Jason, you may have more to add to that, but
yeah, I mean, certainly the control animals fast between 10 and 12 days, and this particular animal survived till day 20. There are multiple reasons why that may have been the case, but the 17 out of 18, the 94% is the part that people really focus on. But yes, there was one death in the treatment group, and we can't explain the reason for that. We'd have to go into the data to get the exact level of virus that was still within the animal's blood at the time. But as I say, sometimes these things do happen when you have animal studies.
Yeah, thanks both there for that additional context. Perhaps could we talk about, given all this development work to date, would you consider at this stage that Galidesivir is effectively the equivalent of a phase 3 asset?
So I'll start with this one. I think that is a very interesting question because sort of working backwards from approval, what do you do right before approval? But you do your final pivotal study. And that's really where we are. We believe that we're one pivotal animal study away from starting to work on our new drug application. So it does feel like a phase 3 asset to me. Yeah, I think it does. Jason?
Yeah, and in some ways, I would say it's actually better because we know that we have an animal study. We know how much the cost of the animal study will be. We know how long it will take. And I know being part of some phase 3 human studies, the US often requires 2 pivotal phase 3 studies done at the same time. And this can cost anywhere between $20 and $100 million, depending on who's doing it and what product it is. Now, we know the cost is about $4 million US, and we know how long it will take. So a completely different scenario. But if you consider Ireland a year ago and then now, we have essentially an approvable asset in a year from now. And I think that is what people should be considering and we have guaranteed sales at the end of that with one customer who basically buy all of our stock. So we don't have the same issues as most companies going through a phase 3 process. So in terms of business development opportunity, I would value our business at greater than a company that has a great phase 3 asset because we have a timeline that is a fraction of what it takes to go from phase 3 to approval.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. We'll touch more on that timeline shortly. We've just had a question come in from the floor just on the priority review voucher. So this could be for Jason or David, but this attendee just asked, can you please explain again the PRV potential value of 155 million, i.e. are there historical comparables or are there clear costs associated with it?
Yeah, so I'll take this first, Jason, and then turn it to you. Again, I know you've done a lot of thinking about this. So in order to get a priority review voucher, you need your drug first approved on a list of tropical diseases that the FDA and Congress has established. Marburg is on that list. Ebola is on that list. So if we get our drug first approved, and we're the only ones that can work on it right now, right? And if we get priority review ourselves when we submit our new drug application, and we should, then we get this voucher. And the voucher can be sold and it enables the owner to get priority review of a different drug at the FDA. So typically what smaller companies would do if they get these vouchers, they sell them typically to large pharmaceutical companies that may be developing their next checkpoint inhibitor or their next GLP-1 agonist. And then the pharmaceutical company gets priority review of that drug that might not otherwise have been eligible for it. Now, you ask about historical comps. Yeah. So what the vouchers have a year ago, I would have told you we're selling for about $100 million US. Over the last 6 months, that's gone to $150 million US. We think there's a couple of reasons for that. A year ago, there were 3 transactable priority review voucher programs. There was a tropical disease, rare pediatric, and medical countermeasures. 2 of those have gone away. They've sunsetted. So right now, Island is pursuing, actually with ISO 101 and Galidesivir, 2 tropical disease priority review voucher programs, the only remaining transactable priority review voucher that's available. Jason, you may want to speak some more to that.
Just only on the fact some people might be wondering, well, why are they worth the $150 million US? And people would say, well, you get your product out there 4 months earlier, which doesn't really matter for a small company. And what you learn being in multinational pharma is when you have a $10 billion a year product, you don't think about the first 3 or 4 months of launch. You think about the latent expiry. So if you're generating $10 billion a year in sales, an extra 4 months will deliver you $4 or $5 billion. And so they would early, they get the extra 4 months at the other end. And that's why these are very valuable, and they're becoming even more valuable because they're becoming rarer. And so we expect that when we, even when we're close to an approval, we'll be approached by several companies bidding for our PRV.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Perhaps just on that, another question's just come through clarifying, can you receive a strategic national stockpile designation contract prior to approval through the animal rule pathway?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of talking with a lot of people as we've been waiting on these FDA results about the path to getting into the strategic national stockpile. One of the things we know is that frequently those conversations about the stockpile start relatively early, right? So things that we're thinking about right now, recognizing, we still have work to do before we get to an approval. Sometimes those contracts can look like support development contracts followed by a commercial contract. So there's a few different ways they can go, but you can absolutely start those conversations and get those contracts nailed down prior to approval.
Yeah, and the benefit of this is because when you think about what we're going after, and other companies have gone after similarly, is there's really no ready customer at the end of that process. If you're looking at treating Ebola, Marburg in the general community, I mean, you might be able to treat a number of outbreaks around the world, and obviously, when the product is approved, we'll be treating those things as compassionate use anyway. But the opportunity here is the one that comes with a huge bioterror threat. And because there's no ready customer, US government and other stockpile governments around the world want to make sure they have countermeasures there just in case these things hit. So you basically go in with a customer, you'll have an order before you complete this process. So you actually have an order ready to go. You can finish your manufacturing, you can make sure you get your inventory there, and you actually have a ready customer with an order in hand ready to put your product into the national stockpile. So because it's just one customer, some people say it can be difficult when you've got one customer. When you have one customer after the last bioterror threat, category A virus, in the world, there's a fairly significant precedent before with the other 5 that were there, but also the fact that they want the last one to get the set.
Yeah, well noted. Thanks, Jason and David, for that comprehensive answer there. This next question probably represents an amalgamation of a few questions, perhaps not surprising, but given the FDA's latest feedback, can you talk about what the latest time frame is now for this NDA, this new drug application, and future approval, just based on the work carried out to date?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a great question. I'm sure it's the forefront of a lot of people's mind. So, just to reiterate, we did get confirmation that we're able to pursue the animal rule. We did get confirmation that we're eligible for priority review voucher. And we have opened the dialogue with the FDA to interact with them to design and flesh out the requirements of the study that they are going to want to see. And these conversations are ongoing. And so I think that, an exact time frame, we don't know that yet because we still need to confirm things with the FDA. But it's short order compared to other drug development programs. Jason?
Yeah, the benefit of the animal rule really puts us and the FDA in a very unique position, and they've been really tremendous to offer the support that they have. There's very strict criteria that come with the animal rule, so any changes or any additions that need to be made there's only two things that can be questioned or asked to change, and that's the animal model itself, and that's any volunteer phase 1 data for safety. So when you think about those two areas, they're very easy to complete studies. They don't involve anything else beyond the requirements for those two things alone. There are no other questions that can be asked. So if anyone's talking about time frame, you look at a couple of months. It's not like usual pathways. Everything is going to be significantly accelerated with everything we do because of the pathway that we're taking and the urgency that we have.
Yeah, look, thanks for that, guys. Perhaps just looking at more broadly now, stepping back a little bit from this clinical development pathway, but quite topical. Are you guys aware of the latest news regarding a recent Marburg outbreak? And just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you won't be surprised. We monitor viral outbreaks. We're aware of Ebola outbreaks, Marburg outbreaks, dengue outbreaks. We watch this a lot. And just in the last week or so, there has been an outbreak of Marburg in Ethiopia. There were, I believe, 9 infected individuals. I don't know the status of those individuals. We're watching that really closely. So one, it's terrible that there was an outbreak. 2, I think that it only highlights the significant need for a countermeasure like Galidesivir, because right now there's nothing. Those poor 9 individuals, they're treating them for symptoms. They're doing their best, but I don't know, how that's going to turn out. And we believe that we could have a countermeasure that might be able to help. And frankly, I look forward to the day, hopefully in the not too distant future, when we can be the person that the WHO calls and says, there's an outbreak. Can you send us some Galidesivir? Can you get it into Ethiopia or Sudan or wherever it might need to be? And of course, the answer to that is yes. Jason?
Yeah, absolutely, David.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Look, this has been a comprehensive, I think, update in the Q&A section just on the clinical development pathway following this news. Perhaps just to round things out, staying on this more broader theme, but would you expect there to be broader opportunities, do you think, for Galidesivir outside of the US as well?
Yeah, sorry, Dave.
Just hit you. Because you're the commercial guy. I know that you know this.
Right. Yeah, yes, absolutely we do. I mean, if you look at the Western allies for the US and other countries as well, I mean, in most pharmaceutical circles, when you look at the US pharmaceutical sales, the US is one market, and they would say ex-US or OUS, outside US, is the other half of the world. So we would expect that a similar value of between 50 and 100% of the US stockpile we could also put into other stockpiles, and then that we would do with WHO of interest in trying to help populations when there are Marburg infections. So yes, we would see significant sales beyond the national stockpile, but we do require really that FDA approval to then open up that opportunity to go outside of the US and get other approvals after that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's a useful summary of that broader market opportunity. So I think thanks to David and Jason here, I think you provided a lot of useful context around a market announcement that's attracted a lot of investor interest. So we'll wrap up the webinar there. But thanks again to our presenters for taking the time to answer those questions. Thanks also to the attendees today, those who submitted questions for the live Q&A and in writing beforehand. Apologies, we didn't manage to get to every question, but a lot of questions that came through, I think, were kind of amalgamated and the presenters were able to answer that quite thoroughly. So as mentioned earlier, a recording of this webinar will be available on Island's website and associated media platforms later today. Just before we go, I'll throw it over to you first, David. Any final comments that you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, first, Sam, thank you so much for hosting this. It's been a great opportunity to give an update on really a monumental day in the history of Island Pharmaceuticals. We've gotten phenomenal information from the FDA, clarifying the path forward, using the animal rule, clarifying the path forward that priority review voucher could be at the end of the approval process for Galidesivir. and then getting the opportunity to work with the FDA to define the study that we need to do to advance down this path. We have had the opportunity as a result of this to substantially de-risk this program, a program that we're keenly excited about. There's tremendous opportunity there. So yeah, thank you all for coming along to this and continue to follow us. I think it's going to be an exciting year. Jason?
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for everyone attending the call. I think today's announcement really tells a very clear and now validated story of rare regulatory access, proven stockpile precedent, and US national security indispensability, I guess I would say. The inflection points are now well identified. We have FDA validation of path, we have PRV monetization of approval, and the precedent of a multi-year US SNS contract. Including, as I mentioned, the final Category A bioGAP remaining in the US national stockpile without an approved countermeasure. This kind of combination of factors culminates in what I would certainly say is a once-in-a-generation alignment of science, regulation, and significant capital return. Happy to say that Ireland and all of our shareholders are right at the center of it. So thanks, everyone, for joining.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. Thanks again to David. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks again to all of our attendees, obviously. It's an exciting timeline now to follow along with Ireland heading into 2026. So we'll see you next time.